I am squatting in an abandoned high-rise. These are the rules I follow to stay safe. I'm not homeless. I have a home. I just don't own it. But it's mine, and I do everything I can to keep it. Every city has abandoned buildings for squatters, but usually you have to deal with the police or unfriendly neighbors. The Andale High-Rise has neither. The police stay away, and so do the locals. As an outsider, I found this place by accident on my first night in the city. It's strange how a 28-story building could be so abandoned and rotten in the middle of everything. Every window is pitch black, the glass in the courtyard is shattered. There are no cars in the parking lot, no guard station, not even a single strand of razor wire on the fence. Less than a mile away is a playground full of screaming, drunk teenagers, but none of them ever come near Andale. No campfires, no music, no bottles flying through the air, just silence. Inside, the main lobby is completely ruined. The double doors are torn off, probably for years, an easy way for any curious person to walk in, but I'm the only one there. Most of the ground floor has collapsed. Water-stained ceiling panels have rotted into mush from the terrible English weather. Water seems to have invaded the place. Even moss and algae grow all over the walls. The elevator shaft is also flooded. As I bent down to look into the murky water, my faint reflection appeared on it, and I caught a glimpse of an old, rusty elevator car just a few steps below the surface. The thought of standing on it, water up to my waist, then bending down and pulling the escape hatch open, kept lingering in my mind. It's natural to wonder what's below that small metal box, submerged in darkness for so many years. I've thought about pressing the call button to see if it would actually surface, defying all laws of logic. That image still haunts me. Meanwhile, the empty shaft rises above my head, the cables rattling in the wind. I learned one thing: you shouldn't stand too close for too long. If you look up, sometimes you'll see something quickly retreating, pulling its head back from the door before you can get a clear look. I found it amusing, even tried to turn it into a game, like hide and seek. But if you play too long, it starts appearing in other places. Any open door can be an invitation. If you ask about Andale, most people just shrug or laugh. Kids talk about it the way they talk about any haunted house, except no one dares to challenge anyone to go up there. No one sneaks in to drink or get high. No one ventures into the basement for a thrill. No one hides contraband there. Andale has all the makings of a typical urban legend, except people actually stay away from it. They might joke, tell ghost stories, but they treat the land as if it's filled with radiation. The city council, I'm surprised they haven't torn this building down, but if anyone has the most to lose when it comes to mentioning it, it's them. Andale was built in the mid-50s as a social housing project. Initially, young mothers moved in, hoping for a stable life, but then their children's health quickly deteriorated. It all started with the infants' babies who never woke up from a peaceful sleep. The deaths were blamed on negligence or abuse. Teenage girls were dragged to jail, crying, simply because of the accusations of callous doctors. In many eyes, the fault always lay with the mother, and those girls had no one to defend them. The first year, there were 2 cases. The next year, 4, and it continued until the place was shut down. It wasn't until 1982 that the cause was traced. The water tank on the roof had been contaminated with heavy metal leaking into the water supply. Not enough to kill adults, but a nightmare for weak immune systems. By then, 38 women had been sentenced to prison, and 23 others had committed suicide before facing trial. And those are only the recorded cases. Not all deaths in Andale were caused by the water supply. This place always found a way to take a child's life, no matter the circumstances. Not a few children starved to death when their parents overdosed in the bathtub. Many others died after accidentally finding their parents' stash, their small bodies convulsing in agony as their panicked mothers screamed for help. Some slipped down the elevator shaft because the door opened as if the car was there, and those were just the ones who were found. Countless others disappeared, considered runaways. Eventually, Andale's reputation became too toxic. The only way was to shut it down, board it up, erase it from records, and pretend it never existed. But even abandoned, Andale continued to kill. If anything changed, it's that it became crueler. I once spoke to a police officer. He told me that a few years after the building was closed, they found a guy dead from septicemia on the 6th floor. No one could believe it. They guessed he got a scratch from a rusty nail and developed gangrene as if he were living in the 19th century. He never went to the hospital, just lay there, slowly and painfully dying as the infection spread through his body. But the strangest thing wasn't his death, but what he did before he died. He piled all his belongings in the room, barricading the door, and then, using his own clothes, he made a flag. On it, he scrawled the word "help" as if he wanted someone below to notice him, even though the lock was right there. He could have left at any time. The police officer I spoke to said he was there when they broke the door down. He still remembers the dead man's eyes 2 days after he passed. He was still wide-eyed, staring intensely at the door, his hands clutching the blanket that smelled sweetly of infection. There are many other stories. Not a few people fell, many cases for no clear reason. The situation became so serious that they had to seal off the door to the roof, but when I arrived, someone had used a sledgehammer to break every barrier. I still don't go up there often, not since the first time I went up and saw pale fingers clinging to the edge of the wall, as if someone was dangling, trying to hold on to their life. I guess many people, seeing that sight, would think someone needed help. They would rush over, reach out, and pull. But when I saw it, there was something about those dirty fingernails that made me cautious. Those fingers didn't look right. So I took off my jacket and used a broom handle to push it closer to the edge. And just as I suspected, those hideous hands immediately grabbed the jacket, pulled it violently from my grip, and let it fall straight down to the parking lot below. Occasionally, I still think about checking more closely, but I have a fear of heights and have never dared to go further to find out what's going on. You'd think I should leave here, but this is my home. I own it as much as it owns me. Now, people even call me the caretaker, as if they forget I wasn't always here. Even the police treat me that way. Can you believe it? Whenever there's a report of a break-in, they call me to check, as if I'm an official employee. The only person who was here as long as me was the philosopher. I don't know his name. I just call him that because of the books he left behind. He came here when the building was still inhabited and stayed for a few years after it was closed. In his apartment, there were dozens of notebooks, thousands of pages written about rituals of child sacrifice to gods who prefer not to be named, along with pictures of bizarre things frozen and medical scans that didn't look real at all. At first, I thought he came here to document a curse. He had dozens of books just to record the strange phenomena he witnessed. Birds growing too many wings, milk bottles solidifying into blood clots. But as I flipped through everything he left behind, I found letters addressed to his wife, who died giving birth. Her death certificate was hidden at the bottom of a curious box full of letters he was still writing to her, even though she was long gone. Another box right next to it contained letters she wrote back scribbles on scraps of paper using blood and waste for ink. He dated them himself, occasionally annotating how they reached him. Delivered by a rat just before it was cannibalized by its companions. Pulled out of a cavity by his dentist. Written on the web of a spider with 13 legs. In one letter, anyway, he revealed the real reason he moved to Andale. He said this place was the key to saving his wife, that he was only a few weeks away from finding a way to open the door. He promised his wife he would bring her back. He said he knew how to do it. I never found out where he went or what happened to him, but when I found his apartment, it was locked. And it probably would have stayed that way if the key hadn't suddenly appeared in my pocket the next morning. Now I live in his old apartment. It's safe. On the walls, he drew symbols that help keep things under control. I don't understand them, but they're easy enough to copy, so I follow them. Every few months, I go over each symbol once, and so far, they've kept me safe and sane. Because in Andale, you absolutely need protection. I don't know exactly when the curse of this place went from something ordinary to something very real and very dark. But it's not just bad luck or poverty anymore, at least not in later years, and definitely not now. You can't just wander around Andale, especially at night. It's dangerous, partly because it attracts a constant stream of the desperate and psychotic who might attack you on sight if you're lucky. If you're unlucky, the next morning they'll appear dead in the hallway, or sometimes just body parts left behind. Patches of skin floating on the murky water flooding the basement stairs. Bloody fingernails dug deep into the ceiling plaster. The most bizarre case I've ever seen was a tooth inside a light bulb with the bloody gum intact at the root, yet the glass around it wasn't cracked. Many people come to Andale for their own purposes, just like the philosopher. Rituals, pacts, things like that. It's best not to bother them. Don't show any sign that you might be a problem. Every night, I lock my door and wait for Andale to do its work. The next morning, I do a round, checking every floor and cleaning up anything left behind by the strange pilgrims of this tower. Most of the rituals I see don't look real. In fact, I guess many who venture here end up becoming victims of something or someone. There are plenty of reasons to stay away from Andale at night, yet most who come here look incredibly naive. Most of what I see looks like it was stolen from a bad death metal band's album. Once I found a book titled Satanism and Magic in the 21st Century. It's hard to believe that the secrets to how the universe works could be in a book with an ISBN and 3,000 Amazon reviews. Of course, not everyone who exploits Andale's energy is so clueless. Once, a guy came to my apartment and paid me 3,000 cash just to guide him to the darkest place in the tower. At first, I didn't understand what he wanted. I thought he was talking about light and shadow, something like that. He replied after I explained how shadows fall in Andale. That kind of darkness can also be a part of it, but I'm looking for a corner. It must be a non-right angle or sharper. The sharper, the better. Do you understand that concept? The way he said that told me he was the type to act superior. A well-dressed guy in his late 20s, neat suit, looking exactly like a typical banker, and acting like one too. This building is full of corners like that, I said. Andale has many rooms with weird designs. People had to make use of the tight space, and sometimes walls meet at narrow angles. Definitely, but I don't know what you mean by darkest. If it's just a lack of light, there's the basement. It's flooded. There's no darker place than that. He bit his lip, hesitating for a few seconds, as if genuinely considering my offer. Not bad, he said, but too difficult to access. And I'm not just talking about darkness in the sense of a lack of light. I'm talking about the kind of darkness found under a bed. The darkness in a small crack in the wall that opens into the space inside the bricks, where a child can't help but wonder what's inside. Somewhere that, for some inexplicable reason, doesn't seem to receive as much of God's attention as other places. I thought for a moment. His words were vague, but strangely, I knew what he was hinting at. A corner? I asked again. It has to be a sharp angle? He nodded. I think I know a spot, I said, and he smiled. A truly repulsive smile. I led him to an apartment on the 8th floor. It was as dilapidated as every other, but there were still old items scattered around. Pull out any drawer, and you can still see the cutlery someone once used. An old TV sat on the shelf. Sitting on the remnants of the sofa, staring at the black screen, could make someone feel like they once knew the people who lived here. Placing a hand on the oven knob, the refrigerator handle, or the yellowed plastic of the light switch brought a quiet sadness. Looking up at the ceiling, you'd see the light fixture had been torn out, as if someone had tried to hang themselves there. The place wasn't large. 3 rooms, a bedroom with a crumpled double bed, a living room that doubled as a kitchen, and a tiny room that seemed to have been used for storage, or maybe to put a washing machine if someone lived alone and had no children. A narrow space, a triangle cut out from the rest when the more important walls were built. The sofa I mentioned, the TV, everything was placed so that whoever sat there could always keep an eye on that small room. Inside, they had once placed a crib. It was still there, with green flies buzzing above. You couldn't see inside unless you stepped right into the room and pulled the blankets aside. But after so many years, no one had done that. Behind the old blankets, the darkness was like a heavy curtain concealing something no one needed to see. A shadow that had devoured the last remaining light for decades. Even though there was a window in the room, daylight couldn't penetrate it. They had placed a crib in there, and it's still there now, with green flies buzzing above. "Perfect!" the businessman exclaimed when he saw it. He scanned the apartment, observing every detail slowly. When his gaze rested on the torn-out ceiling light, a faint smile appeared on his lips. But when he looked at the crib and saw the flies still buzzing over the faded Winnie the Pooh blanket, his breathing suddenly became rapid. "Oh yes, this is exactly what I need," he said. Darkness like under a bed. You deserve the money. I could hire dozens of people to scour this place, but no one would understand the requirement like you do. Thank you, I replied, even though I didn't feel there was anything to be thankful for. The man sat down and carefully opened his briefcase. No pentagrams, but he took out 7 oddly shaped candles. He caught my curious gaze and smiled. Made them myself, he said. Every candle was molded by my own hands. I'm not a great artist, but the dedication is what matters. It took hours to melt the wax. That was the easy part, of course. The hard part was getting the fat to make them. Did you know that hospital medical waste management has surprisingly high security? I didn't know, I replied as he took out some small scraps of wood and a few tiny nails. He carefully pieced the wood together, nailing them into shapes that looked completely random. Oh well, it doesn't matter, he sighed after a few moments of silence, his nimble fingers holding a small hammer, tapping each nail carefully. In no time, he created at least 6 bizarre wooden polygons, and with each new shape, I felt something was off. Do you want to stay and watch? He asked. Absolutely not, I answered immediately. He stopped, then smiled again. You're smart, he said. That's the correct answer. And if I respect that decision, I should also tell you that right now is the safest time to leave. I hurried towards the door as he lit the first candle. But before I left, I glanced at the crib one last time. I was surprised to see that the darkness not only enveloped the inside, but also extended out to the doorframe, as if a curtain had been drawn, except it had depth, a depth that sucked in the light. The businessman didn't seem to care, but after a few seconds he looked up at me, waiting for something. Can I ask? I started. Those who come here? I haven't seen anyone come to a good end. What do you want? I'm looking for a new kind of afterlife. You need an afterlife? Who doesn't? He chuckled softly. It's just that only those who dare to take risks can get a better deal. As for the others, he grimaced. Anyway, it's worth a try. But look who I'm talking to here. He glanced towards the darkness covering the doorframe. I could see shapes flickering within it. You should leave now, he said. I slammed the door shut, and, realizing the sun was setting fast, I ran straight back to my apartment, where I knew the walls would protect me. The next morning when I returned, his briefcase was still in the same spot, leaning against the arm of the sofa. The candles had burned down to the wicks, leaving a strange scent that still lingers now. And him? In the room with the crib, where the green flies continued to buzz, there was now a charred shadow imprinted on the wall, faint and indistinct, but still recognizable as the shape of a person kneeling. Head bowed to the floor in a posture of supplication. Occasionally, I see that shadow move. It turns its head towards me, and in that instant, my temples throb, my ears ring, and darkness begins to invade my vision. I had never considered this apartment a friendly place before, but from then on, I avoided it like the plague. However, there are things worse than that. Not every ritual ends peacefully, and sometimes I'm forced to intervene, something I absolutely hate. If someone wants to dabble in the filthiest corners of the universe, that's their business. If my job is just to clean up what's left, at least that's a one-and-done situation. But it's not always that simple. A guy showed up and declared he would be the new resident, my neighbor, and that we would soon become acquainted. A clumsy old man with an upper-class accent and the look of a disgraced professor. He moved into the apartment next to mine, and even though I barely spoke to him, he didn't pick up the hint and kept trying to be friendly. A few times I tried to warn him that his chosen apartment didn't have many protective measures. He pointed to the strange rashes on his arm and said they were his shield. For the next few weeks, I would occasionally catch him crawling on the floor, scratching at the low corners of the walls or the messy piles of mold. On the very first day, he boasted that he collected fungi. I often saw him carefully swabbing samples onto Petri dishes, whispering things he thought I couldn't hear. I don't think he was completely sane, but he was smart enough to only go out during the day. Meanwhile, his apartment increasingly filled up with chirping vivariums and glass jars soaking cloudy liquid. He was cultivating fungi everywhere, creating conditions for them to absorb the darkness of Andale and grow. Later, his living room was almost overrun by growing fungi. The plaster on the walls crumbled under the spread of microorganisms, leaving only concrete and steel. But even so, the mold continued to proliferate. A couple of times I looked in and saw him throwing raw meat to the sprouting fungal masses growing out of the dilapidated furniture. During that time, the symbols on the shared wall between us often heated up. I had to repaint them almost every day while he continued to fiddle with his fungi. I asked him a few times to tone it down. "This is important work," he growled, an invisible darkness seeping into his voice. "I'm not some stupid addict trying to summon Baphomet. I'm not here to get high. This is science. Progress. That's what I'm pursuing." "Yeah, well, your progress is trying to crawl into my apartment. Can you ask it to stop?" He paused mid-sentence as if I had said something incredibly stupid or maybe too profound. He looked down at his arm, covered in rashes where strange spots now seemed to be growing, as if they were developing too. When he spoke again, his voice was smooth, like a slick old man flirting with a nurse. "These fungi," he said, "they've kept a sample of it in the university for 30 years. Can you imagine? 30 years. And they didn't even know what they had until I found it and unlocked its potential. Now I've traced it to its true source, and I can do things no one ever thought possible." My whole thesis revolves around the idea that fungi have a form of information, processing capability far beyond what we've ever imagined. And your idea isn't bad either. Asking it to stop, perhaps that is one way. He quietly walked away without saying another word, and for the next few days, he buzzed around the building like a frantic small bee in spring, prodding and probing, flying from one trap to another, then diligently collecting the dead rats and voles he caught. When I checked the building in the morning, I often saw him hunched over, meticulously scraping the remains of Andale's latest victims, stuffing them into clear plastic bags for his own purposes. "Don't mind me," he mumbled. "They're worthless to you, but these wretched souls can help me achieve great things." This went on for a month. He no longer bothered to scrape mold or pry from old apartments. He only cared about meat. And by the time it ended, I could confidently say I had never smelled anything worse than the suffocating, hot and damp stench pouring out from behind his locked door. The smell was so bad that I considered calling the police to get rid of him, but then he suddenly vanished from the Andale hallway. He was there the morning before, irritably shooing me out of the way as he lowered some jars into the flooded basement. But the next morning, he was gone, and the hallways of Andale were silent again. But that didn't mean he had left completely. Quite the opposite. 2 days later, I decided to break down his door. I kicked it hard, but instead of swinging open, my foot went straight through the rotten wood like wet cardboard. I pulled my foot out and tried a different approach, grabbing the doorknob and yanking it until it tore right off the decaying frame. The door swung open with a chilling creak, and a hot, damp, foul-smelling gust of air rushed out from within. Inside, I saw everything he had been cultivating had grown out of control. Broken vivariums, creatures inside spilling out, frogs, the size of footballs, stared at me from behind fuzzy, hairy clumps of leaves, while insects with human eyes scurried before being caught by the amphibians. In one corner, rats had nested with old cardboard, their backs covered in fungi growing into the shapes of fingers and human body parts. In another corner, something that looked like a black rubber sheet was continuously snapping at the small animals running past. It took me a few seconds to realize it was a type of jumping fungus. When it finally caught its prey, it pulled the poor creature into the dark corner, clenching it like a fist. I froze, staring at it in horror, until tiny black spots slowly opened up inside that grotesque mass. It had eyes, and it was staring right back at me. The scene was so terrifying that I didn't realize someone was intermittently groaning, trying to talk to me. Finally, the sound reached my ears. I shone my flashlight toward the farthest wall without stepping inside. He was there. He had been half swallowed into the wall, covered head to toe in moss and algae, making him unrecognizable, but I knew it couldn't be anyone else. Strange tentacles continuously burrowed deep into his ears and head, giving him no moment of peace. He tried to speak, but the algae kept crawling into his mouth until, bit by bit, they pierced too deep, and something inside him snapped. His eyes widened further. He let out a high-pitched, panicked shriek, and his lower jaw slowly slid down, dropping onto his chest and finally onto the floor. "Finally got in touch, did you?" I asked. Worst idea I've ever heard. Even in the best conditions, what do you think a fungus can say? Let alone one grown from the ruins of Andale. I guess you never thought to ask it to stay away from my wall, did you? I doubt you were too concerned about other things to care about that. It made me wonder what he had been asking that thing for. As the thought crossed my mind, I quickly scanned the room, looking for anything that stood out. There was something growing on the sofa, something suspiciously strange looking. At a glance, it seemed to resemble the shape of a person. It could have been my imagination, but in the dark, I swore it just turned towards me. Meanwhile, he continued to shake in pain, his eyes locked on me, begging for help. "I'll see what I can do," I said and slammed the door shut. There was something about that monstrous pile on the sofa that genuinely unsettled me. I sent word out, asking for a gun, but a few days later, I received a crossbow instead. A stressed-looking kid, around 16, brought it right to my door. I was surprised he dared to enter the building, but who knows who sent him. I have a strange reputation with the locals, and sometimes it helps. The kid looked like the type who would stomp on my head and rob me blind if I met him elsewhere. But when he spoke to me, he had a respect I didn't think I deserved. I thanked him, took the crossbow, spent the afternoon practicing, and the next morning used it to finish off the scientist. It took a few shots, but finally, an arrow embedded straight in his forehead, ending the pathetic moaning. This time I didn't see anything on the sofa, at least nothing that looked like a person, and I was relieved about that. Afterward, things were quite simple. I called the police, starting a long chain of events that led to dozens of personnel in hazmat suits spraying toxic chemicals all over the room. At one point, I worried they would find his body and ask too many questions. But by the time someone actually stepped inside, there was nothing left but a stain on the floor. I never really found out what he was pursuing, although it's not uncommon for me to find a body or part of one covered in fungi during my morning checks. And I also sometimes catch a glimpse of a strange figure wriggling its way down into the murky water of the elevator shaft. Of course, I could just be connecting unrelated things. A lot of things live in that water. The entire basement is flooded, and if there's anything down there, it has full control over a considerable space. It's a strange world down there. I know this because I once had a visitor who gave me a very bad time. I call him the fisherman because he came to Andale just for the flooded basement. He had seen a photo circulating online for a while if you knew where to look. No one knew who took it or how, but in the picture was the flooded staircase leading down to the basement. Under the black water was a hand of bizarre size, fingers perfectly splayed like a starfish, reaching up from the bottom and gently resting on the third step. The first time I met him, he was sitting comfortably on the edge of the flooded elevator shaft, his legs dangling, water up to his knees. Next to him was a fishing rod already baited. I was initially quite surprised to see him there, with a small fishing hat on his head. A plump but healthy-looking guy in his 40s. One hand held an egg and mayo sandwich, the other swiping Candy Crush on his phone. When I approached, I deliberately made noise so he wouldn't be startled. Startling someone in Andale is never a good idea, no matter how normal they look. Hearing me, he looked up and smiled warmly. "Hello," he waved, still holding the sandwich. "You're the caretaker here, right?" "That's right," I replied. "And who are you?" "Just a tourist," he smiled. "Care to join me? The sun just rose a few minutes ago." "You weren't here when it was dark, were you?" I asked, inwardly wary. "Oh no, you arrived at the right time. Just got here less than 10 minutes before you showed up. I heard you could help, for a small fee, of course." "Help with what?" I asked. "Oh, just let me know if any of the lines start to move," he said, pointing to a fishing rod securely placed right next to the basement entrance. The hatch was propped open, the fishing line dropped into the darkness below, the water's surface barely visible in the gloom. Another line was placed in a corner of the main hall where the floor had collapsed, revealing a deep hole straight down to the basement. "I can't keep an eye on both at once," he continued. "I have bells, but 2 heads are better than 1, aren't they?" "Exactly what are you hoping to catch down there?" I asked. "Do you know about the primordial ocean?" he asked. the deep water that God separated into light and shadow. It's not necessarily a physical location, but at the right time and place, it can connect with certain bodies of water. The last recorded appearance was in an old glass of whiskey in the basement of a forgotten bar in Mexico City. Some unlucky guy spilled the drink, not realizing until the next morning that half the bar was suddenly submerged in water. They quickly dealt with it, but what was swimming in that water is another story, and it all came from the bottom of a glass no wider than my wrist. "Imagine what we can do with this," he said, pointing to the water right at his feet. "You think there are actual fish down there?" I asked. "At least something," he replied. "Of course, I'm willing to pay for any reliable information. Do you have any idea what might be down there?" "Not really," I shrugged. "But I guess it wants to be left alone. You might be right," he murmured, glancing at the other fishing rods. "But I'm not using ordinary bait." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a strange clump of fur and tusks, holding it up for me to see clearly. A tooth of a drowned man at sea. A drone recovered it from a shipwreck off the coast of Norway. And this fur, well, it's actually red algae growing on his bones. I have a lot of things like this and others that might appeal to what's on the other side. I've done a lot of research. Inexpensive to acquire. Come on, sit down. Flat rate, $1. Just sit here until the sun sets. I just have to sit? I asked. And tell me if you hear or see anything. I sighed and sat down next to him, crossing my legs instead of dangling them over the water, though with some reluctance. We sat like that for hours. He brought a lot of food, all homemade, along with plenty of cold beer. We barely talked much, but we ate and drank a significant amount. Not the kind of thing I usually do, but I was being paid to be here, and frankly, I had nowhere else to go. All in all, it was a rather pleasant afternoon until I fell asleep. When I jolted awake, it was with a choked gasp in my throat. My chest felt heavy, as if something had just sat on it and leaned in, followed by strange giggles and clicking footsteps scurrying into the darkness. Maybe it wasn't just a feeling. Panic began to rise as I glanced towards the wide-open door and saw that the moon had been up for a long time. I stumbled, grabbed my flashlight, turned it on, and found no trace of the fisherman. All of his gear was still in place, but the only thing left of him was his hat, still floating on the water. As I stared at it, something sleek gently coiled just beneath the surface and lightly lifted the hat off the water. I panicked, backing away, crawling as fast as I could. This was the worst situation I had ever been in. I knew deep down that I had never been this exposed to danger. The doors opening outside were tempting, but right next to them were the stairs leading downward, and I swear I could hear something approaching. I couldn't help but picture the fungal scientist I had seen in his apartment, but that basement was vast. Who knows what else was hidden down there? I decided on the stairs, my heart hammered the whole way. I had never been stuck outside my room at night, not since the very first night when I slept in the lobby, pulling my coat over me. And Dale never gives anyone a second chance, so I knew I had to be careful. I had to be silent. My only hope was not to be detected. I moved in absolute silence, climbing floor by floor. At the slightest sign of any footsteps, whether human or otherwise, I immediately hid in familiar spots. And Dale truly wakes up at night. Whispering from strange children crawled out of the ventilation shafts, living there for nobody knows how long. Sometimes, I even see ghosts, including a little girl. The sight of her made my stomach clench with an ache of such painful, ravenous hunger that just thinking about it hurt. The little girl looked at me with pleading eyes as I quietly retreated from the wide-open apartment door. I might have been tempted to help her if it weren't for the moonlight shining right through her translucent body. Despite all of that, I managed to reach the 14th floor without incident. It was just when I thought I was safe, in the final step before security, that I came face to face with something out of my worst nightmare. A woman stood in front of my apartment door, silent, pale, her fingernails caked with dirt. More than once, I'd opened the door and seen muddy, bare footprints on the floor. Now I knew who was leaving them every night. From my hiding place, I couldn't see her face, but there was something about her that felt strangely familiar. When she finally turned, I remembered. I recognized her, even though most of her face was gone. The philosopher's wife. He succeeded, it seemed, but I couldn't imagine the price he must have paid because the woman staring at me now had clearly spent years in a grave. Only the faint light and her long hair partially concealed the horrific state she was in. A lipless smile stretched beneath hollowed cheeks and empty eye sockets, yet I could still recognize that in another life, she had been very beautiful. That only made the sight more agonizing. "My love," she whispered, and there was something in her voice that made it hard for me to maintain my composure. I don't know why, after more than a decade of witnessing living nightmares, this ghost was the one that pushed me to the brink. The weight of inevitable loss pressed down on me, and I only realized I was stepping towards her when my knees began to buckle. By the time I reached her, I was crawling on the floor until my fingers gripped her cold, muddy feet, and that's the last thing I remember before waking up in my bed the next morning. Everything looked normal, so normal that I could have dismissed it all as a terrible nightmare. But on the floor were footprints leading from my bed to the door, and then I found the fisherman's gear, still intact where he had left it. But when I pulled up the fishing lines, all the bait was gone. They had been replaced with pieces of the very man who had cast them down. I threw everything back into the water and told myself it was best to forget him. However, every now and then, I can't help but peek through the peephole at night. I never used to, but now I do. Every time I look, she's there looking so sad. It hurts me to think of her standing out there. I should feel horrified, but the feeling it gives is like someone scooped out my heart, leaving a painful, hollow void in my chest. Every time I see her, I wonder what he did to bring her back. He left only one clue, a final letter, I guess. It was undated. He wrote that he was willing to trade everything just to hold her in his arms one more time. Not just his life, but everything he had ever lived through. Every sunset, every sweet dream, every nightmare, every triumph, every failure, every small memory that made him who he was. He would give it all up just to save her. Sometimes I think about him. I guess we must be about the same age. I often imagine what it would have been like if we had met in our younger years. But every time I try to remember my life before coming to this city, before waking up with a coat draped over me, I don't know. It's just so hard to recall, as if there's nothing there, as if something has reached in and taken away all my years. Maybe this is one of those things I should stop worrying about.